Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
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 Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana.
Jamuna Tira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
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 Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Yamunatira Vanachari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
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 Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari.
Gopinatha Vallabha Girivaradhari
Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana
Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Shri Radha Gopinatha ki Shri Gaurnika Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Gaut Premanande all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru Paramba, all glories to Sri Krishna. Today is the auspicious anniversary of the appearance of Lord Ramchandra. In Trinidad, people have immense familiarity with the pastimes of Lord Ram. Pastimes of Lord Ram came to Trinidad with the arrival of the first indentured laborers who came from India. And especially the Ramcharitmanas has become very, very popular. In actuality, there are different versions of the Ramayana compiled by different munis. The original Ramayana, however, is the Ramayana of Valmiki Muni. In South India, there's another Muni by the name of Kamba. So he has also composed one Ramayana in the Tamil language. In northern India, the Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas is very popular. And most of our ancestors came from the northern part of India. So it's quite natural that the Ramcharitmanas also came with them. And perhaps almost every day in Trinidad and Tobago there is some Ramayana satsang going on somewhere. I remember myself and Damodar Prabhu also. Like we grew up in the same village, and we grew up going to Ramayana satsang. With the temple in our village. And it was a very enlivening experience. And some of those pastimes that our teacher used to give still sit very deeply with me, even though so many years have passed. Sometimes when people think about the Hare Krishnas, they say, well, these people don't talk anything about Ramayana. So today, on the anniversary of Lord Ram's appearance, by the blessings of all of you, I want to attempt to speak something from the Ramayana. But interestingly enough, to speak something from the Ramayana, I'll actually read one verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So before we begin, if you know the mantras, you can join in together with me. We'll recite the Mangala Charan prayers. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Everyone loudly together. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once more loudly. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this verse is from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, third chapter, text number 22. It's one of a series of verses that are describing different incarnations of the Lord. So this verse specifically describes the incarnation of Lord Ram. Naradevatam apanna surakarya chikirshaya samudra nigrahadini chakre viryanyata param. In the 18th incarnation, the Lord appeared as King Ram. In order to perform some pleasing work for the Devatas, he exhibited superhuman powers by controlling the Indian Ocean and then killing the atheist king Ravana, who was on the other side of the sea. Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice commentary on this verse. So I'll read that. The personality of Godhead Sri Ram assumed the form of a human being and appeared on the earth for the purpose of doing some pleasing work for the Devatas, or the administrative personalities to maintain the order of the universe. Some great demons and atheists like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu and many others became very famous due to advancement of material civilization by the help of material science and other activities with a spirit of challenging the established order of the Lord. For example, the attempt to fly to other planets by material means is a challenge to the established order. The conditions of each and every planet are different, and different classes of human beings are accommodated there for particular purposes mentioned in the codes of the Lord. But puffed up by tiny success in material advancement, sometimes the godless materialists challenged the existence of God. Ravana was one of them. And he wanted to deport ordinary men to the planet of Indra, heaven, by material means, without consideration of necessary qualifications. And just like you want to go to the US, right? You need a visa. Before you need a visa, you first have to have a passport and you have to have the qualification, else you could get your visa denied. You know, although people try and they enter the country illegally, that seems to be a big concern for the US government right now. I think maybe we have some concern like that also, that has been growing over the years. So Ravana, he had a similar thing, but he just didn't want to go to another country. He wanted to go to the heavenly planets and send people there without the necessary paperwork to cause some problems for Indra's immigration department. He wanted a staircase to be built up directly reaching the heavenly planet so that people might not be required to undergo the routine pious work necessary to enter that planet. I was just reading this sentence, right? I'm thinking it might be easier to perform pious work than to climb all those stairs. I can't imagine the planet of Indra is too close to us. He also wanted to perform other acts against the established rule of the Lord. He even challenged the authority of Sri Ram, the personality of Godhead, and kidnapped his wife, Sita. Of course, Lord Ram came to chastise this atheist, answering the prayer and desire of the Devatas. He therefore took up the challenge of Ravana, and the complete activity is the subject matter of the Ramayana. Because Lord Ramachandra was the personality of Godhead, he exhibited superhuman activities which no human being, including the materially advanced Ravana, could perform. Lord Ramachandra prepared a road on the Indian Ocean with stones that floated on the water. The modern scientists have done research in the area of weightlessness, but it is not possible to bring in weightlessness anywhere and everywhere. But because weightlessness is the creation of the Lord, by which he can make gigantic planets fly and float in the air, he made the stones, even within this earth, to be weightless, and prepared a stone bridge on the sea without any supporting pillar. That is the display of the power of God. So the pastimes of Lord Ram, as I mentioned before, is prominently described in the Ramayana. Apart from Krishna, Lord Ram is the most prominent incarnation of the Lord. Other incarnations, sometimes people may not know about it. Sometimes you tell people we're celebrating Varaha Appearance Day. Who? And what is that? Is that when you explain to them, then they get some understanding. But if you tell somebody we're celebrating Ram Navami, everybody gets the idea immediately. If you tell them Janmashtami, everybody gets the idea immediately. So Lord Ram, his pastimes are exceptionally beautiful. You know, the Ramayana is known as an epic. An epic. In it you will find romance. If we read in Balkand, Lord Ram getting the first glance with Sita Devi in Mithila, and how he won her hand in marriage. There's intrigue, which is the pastime I'll discuss today, that takes place between Kaikeyi, Manthara, and then later Dasharath. There's adventure, the Lord embarking on an epic rescue mission, the first recorded anti-kidnapping squad, you know, launched an incursion into Lanka to rescue Sita Devi. There's friendship. There are pastimes where persons express their complete devotion to Ram. For example, the pastime of Shabari, who was waiting there in that ashram just to offer Lord Ram tasty fruits when he would come to that place. Such a beautiful, I know devotees, like, they have, not even devotees, just reading the Ramayana, they would cry. They would cry. My grandfather and grandmother, there used to be the Ramayana serial on TV. That used to be on a Saturday, I think, and Mahabharat used to be on a Sunday. And they would clear their whole calendar just to watch these shows on TV. And they would become so emotional. You know, they knew the story, and they would say, you know, Why Dasharatha allowing Kaikeyi to do this? They doesn't know. No, don't go and do it. How normal, trying to tell them not to go and do that. That will happen. Getting really invested into the story. And as being displayed on TV. It has that ability to affect us on a very deep level. Actually, Madhvacharya, in his Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay, he describes 4 levels by which we can appreciate the epics, like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. The first level is the literal. If you read it, it's a very good book. There are so many novelizations of it. Krishna Dharma has put the Mahabharata into a novel, a very beautiful language. The same thing he has done with Ramayana. Shubha Vilas of Mumbai, he has made it into a very approachable book by putting life lessons in between the different incidents of the Ramayana. And he names his series The Game of Life. Because all of the lessons, all of the incidents that take place in the Ramayana, we could actually apply it in our own life. So literally, it is just a very good book to read. It is perhaps what we might call a bestseller. It is very entertaining, it is very riveting. And then on the other extreme of that, it's a transcendental literature. It is completely transcendental. Even though it is describing a historical series of events, the Lord appearing with his devotees and performing so many pastimes. Ultimately, why incidents take place? It is because of the desire of the Lord. Why was Ravana able to kidnap Sita? If Ram is the Supreme Lord, he didn't know Ravana would come. But on the transcendental level, this is happening under the agency of the internal potency of the Lord, known as Yoga Maya. The energy of the Lord by which all of the pastimes of the Lord are arranged and executed. So much so that even the Lord gives his own self to the influence of Yoga Maya, that he can fully be invested in his own pastimes. So that's the transcendental level. It is all by the arrangement of the Lord. So whether you accept it literally, or whether we accept it transcendentally, it is good. But in between that, there are 2 other meanings. There's a metaphorical meaning, where the different incidents in the Ramayana can be analogous to ourselves, to our mind, and so on, and we can take lessons from that. And the 4th way we can understand the epics is ethically. When we see the different incidents that are unfolding between the different personalities within these epics, we can see ourselves in those persons. And what they do and how they resolve situations can teach us what not to do and can teach us what to do. Because if we extract different situations from these books, and Ramayana specifically because we're discussing that today, we can say, but a similar situation happened to me. I was Dasharatha in that situation. I was Manthara in that situation. I was Kaikeyi in that situation. And we can learn lessons of how not to act and then see the ideal behavior of persons of how to act. So ethically. And this ethical and metaphorical meaning of the Ramayana is very instrumental in a sadhaka who is traversing the path of bhakti. And when we actually understand these deeper meanings in these texts, it can create a revolution in our consciousness. Valmiki Muni, he is described in the Ramayana as Kujantam Rama Rameti Maduram Maduraksharam Aruhya Kavita Shakam Vande Valmiki Kokilam. That there's a kokila, a A kokila is a bird that sings very sweetly. And this bird is seated very firmly on the tree of poetic Shastra. And there's an especially beautiful branch of poetic Shastra, which is the Ramayana, which is known as a Mahakavya. Beautiful poetry composed in Anushtup Chanda. And this bird is sitting there and he's beautifully reciting. What is he reciting? Kujantam Rama Ramiti. He's reciting the pastimes and the name and the glories of Lord Ram. Madhuram. It is very sweet. It is attractive to the senses. That bird is none other than Valmiki Muni. Kujantam Rama Rameti Madhuram Madhuraksharam. Aruhya Kavita Shakam Vande Valmiki Kokilam. And if we examine most of the Ramayana satsangs we go to, what is the most attractive thing? The singing. To hear the verses of the Ramayana sung very beautifully is very attractive. Very, very attractive. But even deeper than that is to understand the meaning. And therefore in the next verse glorifying Valmiki Muni, it is said, Valmiki Muni Singhasya Kavita Vanacharanaha Shrindvan Rama Katha Nadam Konayati Paramgatim. So in the previous verse, Valmiki is described as a kokila, a very sweet sounding bird, Madhuram Madhuraksharam. But in this verse, Valmiki Muni Singhasya, Valmiki is being described as a lion. So Acharyas, they ask the question, how can the same person be described in one instance as a very sweet sounding bird and in the other instance be described as a lion? On its best day, you cannot get a lion to sound sweet like a bird. If a lion begins to sing, nobody stands up and listens. People go in the other direction as quick as possible. And on its worst day, you can't get a beautiful songbird to sound like a lion. So this is a sort of paradoxical situation. How is Valmiki being described as a sweet sounding bird, and in the next line, he's being described as a lion? So Acharyas give the answer to this question. That if we listen to the narration of Ramayana, it is very beautiful. It is very attractive. It draws us in by its sweet melodies, by its poetic descriptions. But if we understand the meaning that is hidden within this beautiful poetry, that meaning is like the sound of a lion driving out all misconceptions from the heart. Therefore, simultaneously, Valmiki is a sweet-sounding bird. But when we appreciate the meaning that is hidden within that poetry, our consciousness can become purified. And the anarthas that prevent us from growing in bhakti can be dissipated and dispelled from our heart. Just like when a lion roars, all insignificant creatures run away in fear. Similarly, when the meaning becomes apparent within our heart, that is like the roar of a lion driving out anarthas from within our consciousness. So with that being said, we'll discuss this beautiful pastime from the Ayodhya Kand of the Ramayana. Dasharath was king. He wasn't depending on a 4-year term or a 5-year term for re-election. Dasharath ruled Ayodhya for 60,000 years. Unchallenged. 60,000 years. And for most of that 60,000 years, despite having opulence in his kingdom, once Ayodhya suffered an 11-year drought. But because of the skill of Dasharath in managing the resources of the nation, for 11 years nobody felt inconvenience, no crops went unwatered, there was no shortage of anything. 11-year drought, no rain. No rain. 11 years. This is how qualified a king he was. Eventually, he rectified the problem by launching an attack against Shani, who had put his glance over Ayodhya. This is how qualified he was, and rectified the situation with the drought. And despite having so much facility, Dashrath lacked one thing. He had no sons. That's very interesting. That is the nature of the material world. That is the nature of the material world. There is no person who can have everything. Krishna says in the Gita that every endeavor in this material world is covered by some fault, just as smoke is covered by fire. We can have so much, but this thing. There's always one thing, there's always another thing that we can't have. So Dasharath, he had so much at his disposal, yet he had nothing. There's an interesting way we can look at that. That we can have an ocean of salt water, but it cannot satisfy our thirst. As much as a little well of sweet water. An ocean of salt water cannot satisfy thirst. In fact, it will kill us if we try to drink. But a little bit of sweet water can immediately bring satisfaction. Sometimes happiness does not come in the multitude of things that we acquire, but in the few things that have value in and of themselves. So Dashrath, he had so much, yet in his heart he had nothing. He couldn't have a son. By the arrangement of the Lord, eventually he had 4 sons. Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna. Dashrath, as I mentioned, was already 60,000 years old. He was 60,000 years old. And he began to see omens. He began to see some negative things happening around him. Some premonitions he was getting. Bad dreams he was seeing. And he took that indication very seriously. He consulted with his chief minister, Vashishta. And he said that, listen, this is what I'm seeing. I fear that some calamity will befall us. If not us, will definitely befall me. And therefore, it is my desire that I place Lord Ram on the throne immediately. At least not on the throne, but to make him the regent prince. That immediately upon my demise, he will immediately ascend to the throne. And he consulted with Vashishta. Do you think this is a good idea? Vashishta agreed. Indeed, it is a wonderful idea. And they saw that the very next day, the star known as Pushyami would be on the ascendant. It's very auspicious. And they agreed that immediately, let us have the ceremony for installing Ram as the prince regent. Message was sent to Ram that you should fast until the morning along with Sita, and the ceremony would take place. He also called all his ministers into council, advised them what he and Vashishta had discussed, and they all agreed. No hesitation, install Ram. Install Ram on the throne. That's very interesting. Like Dasharath, he could have held on. We took those signs very seriously. And it's very important that we must come to terms with our own mortality. We must let go of our attachments in this world voluntarily before it is taken away forcefully and oftentimes painfully. His Holiness Bhakti Tirth Swami, he taught us a very valuable lesson in his final days. He had this phrase, die before dying. That we should die before dying. And how many indications do we see that at any moment in time, death will come. High blood pressure, joint pain, failing eyesight, diabetes, heart problem, liver problem, kidney problem. How many omens do we see? And yet we take it for granted. Not me. Not me. There's a very nice verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Deha patya kalatradishu asatsaineshu asatswapi. Tesham pramato nidhanam pashyan api na pashyati. Pashyan api na pashyati. Persons who are devoid of Atma Tattva. They don't know the real nature of the self and the relation with the Supreme. We don't inquire into the real problems of life. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. We don't inquire into the real problems of life. And yet and being too attached, we place hope in fallible soldiers. Like if you want to cross the ocean, right? You go on a boat or you go on a plane. Would somebody ever say, well, look, this dog, our dog is very good at swimming. So if this dog could swim very good, let me grab the tail and try to cross the ocean. Not even a big ocean. If I see a dog in Toko one day and I hold the tail, will the dog be able to carry me even to Tobago? It's not possible. So what are the fallible soldiers in this world? Insurance policy, doctors, police, family members, government, thinking our problems will be solved. But pashyan api na pashyati. We are not seeing that destruction is inevitable. Our father has died, our grandfather has died, our great-grandfather has died. But not me. At least not yet. At least not yet. But Dashrath, he wasn't confused. He knew his end was near and he put things in place. He was not pashyan api na pashyati. He was seeing. He had proper vision, drishti. And he put things in place. The news eventually went to Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi was a very unique person. She was the youngest of Dashrath's wives. Dashrath actually had 353 wives. 3 of them are prominent. 3 of them are prominent. Kaushalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi was the youngest. And she became the most favored by Dashrath. She was very beautiful. She spoke in a very pleasing way to Dashrath. Their relationship was very congenial. He had a special place of affection in his heart for Kaikeyi. That being said, there was no animosity amongst the queens. There was no animosity amongst the sons. All mothers saw all the sons as their own son, and there was friendliness and no competition amongst the queens also. And who took the news of Lord Ram's being made the Prince Regent to Kaikeyi was her servant by the name of Manthara. Manthara was a very unique character. She was a hunchback, so she had some physical deformity. She actually came to Ayodhya with Kaikeyi when she married Dashrath. So she was a companion to Kaikeyi even before her marriage to Dashrath. And as sometimes people have some disability. What is the natural thing people do? Make jokes at their expense. Like, sometimes somebody can't run so fast, and you give them a nickname. Flash. you know? Somebody might have some vision problem. They have a very thick glasses, so you give him a nickname too. Cyclops. And there's no maliciousness in it, depending on the relationship. But Manthara, she bit her tongue when persons would insult her. But as Kaikeyi became more favored by Dasharatha, Manthara, who was the chief of all Kaikeyi's attendants, the value of her stock also rose. So because her position increased, then all the jokes decreased. So at least nobody would say it out loud. Maybe they would speak by themselves in hushed tones. And she resented that. And when she heard the news that Ram would be made the prince, she went to Kaikeyi. She said, "Didn't you hear the news that Lord Ram would be made the prince regent? You don't find that astonishing?" And Kaikeyi was overwhelmed with happiness. She took off a beautiful necklace and she gave it to Manthara as a gift. Manthara, she scoffed at Kaikeyi and threw the necklace on the ground. Do you think this is a time to rejoice? Don't you see the conspiracy that has been put afoot? Bharat should be king, not Ram. But how could Bharat become king? Kaikeyi remarked. Ram is the eldest. It is all law that the eldest son be made king. He should be king. This is our tradition. I am so happy that Ram is being made king. You foolish queen, you are so blind by your affection. It has made you senseless. Why do you think Dasharatha is making Ram the prince regent, but Bharat is not here? Bharat was out of the country for some time by some relatives. Why is he doing it? Because there is some plan afoot that Bharat should be marginalized and perhaps even killed. Kaikeyi was a bit disturbed, but she began to listen and take very seriously what Manthara was saying. She said, "You don't know what will happen. If Ram becomes the prince regent, then you will no longer be the favored queen of Dasharatha. Kaushalya will now become the most favored queen of Dasharatha. What do you think will happen? For all the years that Kaushalya, even though she was senior to you, had to stand in your shadow, she will now be in a position to exact her revenge. That you will now become the maidservant of Kaushalya." What do you think about that? This is what you want? And who knows? They may even launch a plan to take Bharat out of the picture. Kaikeyi listened, and she became convinced that what Manthara was saying is true. What Manthara was saying was true. So what was the solution? Manthara suggested, you remember many years ago that you rescued Dasharatha in battle and he made a promise of 2 boons to you and you never asked him for it? Now that time has come. Go to Dasharatha and make him pay his debt. You should tell Dasharatha that Ram should not be king, but Bharat should be made king. And not only should Bharat be made king, Ram should be exiled for at least 14 years from the kingdom. That is enough time by which Bharat could win over the citizens by his management. If Ram remains, then Ram could launch a mutiny because the citizens love him and they will kill Bharat. You have to send him away by himself, so you won't be able to launch any counter-strike against Bharat. You know what they say in Trinidad? Take in front before front take you. This was her advice to Kaikeyi. And Kaikeyi bought that wholesale. She went to Dasharath, who was overjoyed to see Kaikeyi enter his quarters. But her face was sullen. What is wrong? This is my conditions. You remember that boon? You promised those 2 boons? I've come to collect. This is what I want. And Dasharath became pale. The blood drained from his face. His voice began to falter. Tears came to his eyes. He lost his composure and balance. It was like if somebody had taken a sledgehammer directly into his heart. Why are you saying these things? Why are you saying this? Why are you demanding such a thing? And she insisted, you have to pay. And he said, so be it. I have made my promise. I have to fulfill it. So be it. But I disown you as my wife. We have no longer any connection. And everybody in Ayodhya was in complete uproar. Complete uproar. What is going on here? They wanted to immediately launch a strike. Maybe Bharat has something to do with it. Where did this come from? And Kaikeyi, even though people were protesting, she was completely confident in the decision she had made. And there's some valuable lessons we could learn from this. Manthara came not for Kaikeyi's benefit. Manthara came for Manthara's benefit. Because she felt her position would be relegated and she would be the butt of ridicule. And she would become just a common person again in the kingdom if Ram became king. And she used Kaikeyi conveniently to achieve her end. She used her conveniently. And she sowed that seed of doubt into the heart of Kaikeyi. That seed of doubt was sowed into the fertile soil of Kaikeyi's naive heart. What was Kaikeyi's fault? She submissively listened to the nefarious counsel of Manthara. So listening is one thing. But if she had gone to Dasharath and said, my dear Lord, this is what I've been told. Is there any truth to this? Is this your plan? I call upon one of my boons. Be completely honest and truthful with me. And Dasharath would have said, no. I think something is going to happen to me very soon. And therefore I'm taking this. It is our rule that Ram is... It just happens by circumstance that Bharat is out of the country, out of the kingdom. But I've already sent word for Bharat to come. I would have loved nothing more than... This is what Dasharath would have said. And her doubt would have been appeased. But she took that, what Manthara was saying, and didn't think to verify it. She didn't think, let me get this verified. How many times has it happened in our Sangha? Or in our circles, in work or wherever? Persons come and they tell us something and they sow some seed in our heart. Rather than go and ask the person and get it verified to find out if it is true, our response is true. Not, is that true? Did you get this verified? Let me go directly to the person and find out about whom you are speaking. And ask them directly. And what we instead do is rather than talk to people, To get to the real understanding, we sit and we talk about people and come to our own conclusion. And many a relationship has been destroyed by that type of attitude. Take time to find out if something is true rather than just take it and run with it. It is very destructive. In our devotee sangha, what to speak of in our devotee sangha, in any sangha, whether work or friends, rumors and gossip destroy relationships. It destroys organizations. This example we see here in the activity between Manthara and Kaikeyi. When a mouthful of disinformation falls upon a receptive ear, it sows the seed of destruction. It's just a matter of time. And oftentimes when that happens, relationships come to a point of not being able to be mended. Dashrath said in no unclear terms, I disown you as my wife. So what did she lose? She lost the love of her husband, and ultimately she lost her husband altogether. Because she didn't take time to have that conversation. Sometimes one uncomfortable conversation could save us from many unbearable situations. If Kaikeyi only took the time. Another lesson is be careful who we give our ear to. Not everybody who comes to us with information or advice is our friend. We have to be very careful whom we place our trust and faith in. This pastime is teaching us that. Kaikeyi, she took that information and she constructed, Chaitanya Charan, he mentions this, she constructed this image of Bharat in her consciousness. And she thought everything I am doing here is for the pleasure of Bharat, for his benefit. Chaitanya Charan, he calls it the imaginary Bharat. She constructed this imaginary Bharat in her consciousness, and when Bharat came, Dashrath had already died, Rama was already left. At that time, he had gotten to Chitrakoot. When Bharat saw what has happened, and his mother said, I did this for you, Bharat was ashamed. He was appalled. And it's only at that time Kaikeyi realized the error in her ways. Up until that point, she thought she was acting perfectly. She constructed this imaginary conception of Bharat and what Bharat would want and what Bharat would like, and I'm acting for his benefit. Where's Bharat? In the other country. She didn't have time to consult with him. Is this what you really want? Is this what you really want? And Bharat said, are you fool? How could you even think such a thing? My life is in the service of Ram. How could I even think to sit on the throne and have Ram become my servant? And then finally, like one way we can look at this pastime is metaphorically. So transcendentally, this is all the arrangement of the Lord. Literally, it is full of intrigue. Ethically, it can guide us in making decisions. Metaphorically, Ayodhya is like our hearts. Manthara is the wicked mind. And Kaikeyi is all of us. When we listen to the mind and don't verify it and control the mind by higher instruction and higher guidance, the result is Ram will be banished from Ayodhya. Ram will be banished from our hearts. So how do we control the mind? The mind has to be guided by a superior force. The mind has to be guided by proper counselors, by good Sangha, Siksha and Diksha gurus, who can guide us honestly for our benefit. The mind has to be guided by the instructions and teachings of Shastra, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ramayana. The mind has to be guided by being purified through the sound of the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And when the mind is guided in this way, then Ram remains in Ayodhya. Ram remains in our heart. So with that, I'll stop.